a podcast to honor the gods.
This better come with a sacrifice.
Deus Ex Media.
Content Capable acknowledges the Indigenous people on the land on which we record this podcast, the Turungurung people. We offer our respect to their elders, past, present, and emerging, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. Sovereignty was never ceded. Welcome to Content Capable, the podcast where if you delay your haircut by enough time, you will start looking like a woolly mammoth that your mother called you 3 weeks ago. I'm Sam, I'm your host. I am currently looking like a woolly mammoth. The amount of product I'm putting into my hair nowadays is slightly concerning. Just the volume of hair, and it's completely uncontrollable. Looking a little bit more dapper than I am is my guest today, Zach from Belated Binge. Welcome back, Zach.
Hi. It's the hat. It's the hat. It covers everything.
It makes everything look professional. It tucks it all away.
Exactly. And you don't use video, right? This is audio only?
Only audio.
Perfect.
Which is probably the greatest decision I've made so far. If I made it a video podcast, I don't know. I have friends who work in broadcast journalism, and we always turn around, and I'd like to get into broadcast journalism, back into that at some point, but we always turn around and go, they are just so obsessed with their image, which understandably they're on TV every day, but I don't know whether I could be that obsessed with making sure I look good and sound good, when I can just ride away and it be perfect.
I get it. I've gone back and forth on my podcast, whether video is on or off. I did it at the start, found that it was a whole lot of work, and I hated editing video so much, just so much, that I stopped, because my wife also kicked me down to the basement, and so my aesthetic was slightly different as well, and so I just turned the camera off. But here recently, I've actually started to see a little bit of listenership happening on YouTube. And so I've turned the camera back on, and now we're doing that now that I've set myself up with a little... I'm still stuck in the dungeon, but I've carved out a little corner of it. I actually just reconfigured it for you, to be honest. This is a whole new setup, and I did it just for you, Sam. I'm probably going to move it all back after we're done here.
Yeah, it's it is fascinating, the iterations. I'm at the point now where I've been recording with this microphone for long enough that I'm considering moving on to probably a higher quality one, and to do that requires me to actually think, which I haven't gotten around to doing. So this one has worked very well. For those who don't know, I've been recording on the same microphone for the whole time. I haven't changed my setup once. The only minor setup, which we were bemoaning before we started recording, is that I'm now using AirPods in my ears, and they are not working all the time. But that is just an AirPods thing sometimes.
It is. I've been on the same microphone since I started the podcast. I actually got this microphone, what was it? Probably 4 years ago now, maybe 5 years ago, to when I was recording music at home. And so when I decided to do a podcast, I was like, well, this will be easy. This part of the setup, not doing a podcast, is easy, but having a decent microphone that doesn't make me sound like I'm shouting into the end of a tin can on a string, that part I at least had figured out. It was the only thing I had figured out when I started, but it was the one thing that I had figured out for the podcast.
Look, it's half the battle, and as every podcaster will always say, the audio quality, once you start making improvements in audio quality, you start realizing how important it is, bit by bit. But it kind of, what you were mentioning just there kind of speaks to what we're chatting about today, which is having like a collection of interests that don't necessarily have a common theme. And you mentioned music there as well. Did you want to explain what you were doing music-wise back then?
Oh, I could. Yeah, so music is one of the many things that I have, I guess what you might call completely polar opposite interests in, creatively, specifically. I started music as a wannabe rapper in college back when I was 18 years old. And then in my early 20s, I started playing in an acoustic country band and writing country songs. And when I say rapping and doing country, I don't mean the blend between the two, like the country rap hip hop stuff. Like, no, I was literally polar opposite ends of the spectrum sonically, in music, and that kind of is what I find myself in life, and that's what's made content creation so, I think, such an odd venture to take on for somebody like me. When you think about the concept that they always preach to you, I'm sure that you have heard this in your background in radio and being in journalism and whatnot. Like there's a significant portion of that is recognizing who your audience is. And
100%.
And when you start, the conventional wisdom, if you will, or unconventional, I guess, when you're talking about content creation, because it's a very unconventional career path, is to find your niche, right? Like, how many times have you heard that? How many times have somebody said to you, find your niche? Like, you have to niche down. If you try to appeal to everybody, you will appeal to no one. You have to find your special little target audience and do everything tailored to them. And when you're me, somebody that has such like varying interests that contradict one another so much, that's a really difficult concept.
Yes, it is. It is just it. I'm bad at like choosing a focus. If anyone's been listening to this podcast for any length of time, you'd know that. And part of the reason why this podcast exists is because of that. But like at the same time, it's so important for success to kind of know what people are expecting out of you and to kind of go, yep, we're going to run with that. But like, I don't know. It's just, for some people, and I think especially for people like you and I, who do have a lot of very, very varied interests, it is just so hard to narrow it down to go, I'm just going to focus on that.
Yeah, it's almost like, how do I make something that is both fulfilling for me and compelling enough for me to not get burnt out on one thing or whatever, while also serving an audience that can potentially discover and grow with you? Because that's one of the things that I always think about, like with my podcast, for instance. It's called Belated Binge. The concept is I was super late to come around on all of these series, whether they be book or TV, that I now find to be some of like my favorite forms of entertainment, and I almost missed them because I was so late. And so it was always intended to be that, to give me a little bit of latitude. But the shows or books that I'm covering right now couldn't be more different from each other and have more different audiences that are there. And so I know it happened when I first expanded, because I started just talking about Harry Potter at first to kind of see if I could even do a podcast. And Harry Potter is one of those things where I always kind of joke on the podcast that I am almost the exact same age as Harry in the movie canon, and I got made fun of growing up for how much I looked like him. Yet I didn't read the books till I was in my mid-20s. But
wow, yeah.
And so that was my first venture into the podcasting sphere, and but I said from the beginning, like, this is not a Harry Potter podcast. There are 100 of those. If you want a Harry Potter podcast, I can recommend some to you.
Yeah.
Like, this is a series binge podcast of some of my favorite series, and the next ones that I launched were Sons of Anarchy, which tell me how many I've discovered a few, but let's just say the crossover isn't expected to be particularly high between those two target audiences. I've covered like season 1 of The Office so far, which is another just like breed of people that are obsessed with The Office. And then coming together, like, I know when I first started to branch out, I lost Harry Potter listeners.
Yeah.
Because because I didn't solely focus on just that niche. You know what I mean? Like, I've kind of made the up listenership a bit, like, through the other series. You know what I mean? But I had to lose some and then kind of fill that back up to try to get to some semblance of growth, which is what we're all trying to do as content creators, right? Like, we're not trying to shout into the void. But it was an interesting concept. So when you reached out to say, like, hey, do you want to come back on? Do you have a topic in mind? I was like, you know what? I've been thinking about this a lot lately. So sure.
Yeah. It is a fascinating part. Like, as you said, as content creators, theoretically, our goal is to just, like, keep heading in the same direction, make sure that, you know, we aren't messing anything up, and make sure that we're doing, you know, the exact same thing. And it does bring theoretical great success. You know, you look at you know, other very successful podcasts who have very good niches. Everything from, like, you know, it sounds like a cult, through to, you know, My Cabbages. You know, they've all got a very clear direction, and, like, you know, this is what our corner is going to be, and they find the variety in that. But then there's people like you and I who just can't quite decide on, like, that this is going to be my corner. Like, it is, and it kind of then spills out into all the rest of your interests as well. You know, besides, you know, creating podcasts and stuff, you're also a bit of a varied sports fan as well.
I am an absolute NBA nerd. I am just so probably annoying to my other NBA friends because I will talk their ear off about the salary cap and trade restrictions and rules and all of this. You're probably falling asleep already just at me saying some of these words. Like, I'll go down that rabbit hole, and then I'll go jump on my Harley, and I'll go ride down to the local dealership in my leather jacket, and then throw a hat on, like this one that has, like, an NBA logo on it, and I'll wear, like, Air Jordans because I'm like a closet, not really a closet sneakerhead. I'm a low-key sneakerhead. And then I'll go get geeked up about dirt bike racing, and then I'll go, like, it is, and I don't think that I'm special by any stretch of the imagination. Like, I think maybe a little bit unique, but I think what I find a little bit not frustrating, not even fascinating necessarily, but where the unique challenge kind of is a lot of my interests tend to be what makes up personalities. You know what I mean? Like, if you meet someone that is a real Potterhead, right? Like, they are whatever the kids are going to say, 10 toes deep in it, like, cosplaying and going to conventions and all of that kind of stuff. When you meet somebody who fancies themselves a quote unquote biker. Like that is who they are. They are always kind of that image, that thing. It kind of takes over their personality. Same with, sneakerheads are usually all into that with fashion and stuff like that. And people who are really into sports are like really into sports. And then like I cross these weird lines of fandom and interest and stuff that I look like I'm either like the worst dressed cosplayer for Halloween every time I step out of the house, or I look like a completely different person if you see me day to day, depending on whatever it is I'm doing today. It's like, are you going to a biker rally, or are you going to go like to a pickup game? Who are you?
Yes. Who are you? You do not look like a normal fan of anything.
And are you even a real person? Because it does. That's one of the things that I also struggle with, I think, is trying to make sure that whatever audience is out there that I might be reaching for the first time or speaking to, that like I don't want to come off as disingenuous to whatever like lane of interest that I have, because I do feel like I go pretty deep in like all of those directions. But if I'm almost hesitant to mention the other ones, because then they're going to be like, wait, what? Like going to a bike night and passing out stickers for a Harry Potter podcast, like that doesn't seem like real great marketing strategy.
It's reminding me of like a lot of times when like a bike gang is like depicted in like popular media. They're actually like massive softies, and like they're obviously like really really tight knit. I'm thinking of like those Bob's Burgers episodes where that biker gang, they give birth in the restaurant, and so then like the Belchers have this tie to this biker gang at all times, and Louise of course absolutely abuses it. But yes, no, it is a fascinating one. Do you find it hard to kind of, I don't know, people look at you and go, oh, you've got such a varied spot of interest, so you can't, as you said, you go quite deep with all of them, but like people assume that you can't go deep with your interests, and then that you've only got a surface level interest?
Maybe. Like I haven't gotten that direct feedback, I think, but I think it is I've never thought of it this way before, but I think it's almost like a living in a constant state of, what do they call that? Like imposter syndrome almost. Mm-hmm. Like, and I don't want it to be like, I don't want this whole episode to sound like I don't know who I am. Like I'm pretty comfortable in who I am and the stuff that I like, and I like what I like. But where it gets wonky for me is trying to be a creator within it, because you're expected to be like so passionate about this one thing or so vested in this one thing that you can't possibly have other interests, can you? Like, this is who you are. You're supposed to be the foremost expert on this one thing if you dare get in front of a microphone. Like, I don't want to hear that you like something else. That's not okay. You're not a human being. You're a content creator. Like, tell me the thing I want to hear about, because that's the thing that's most important to me. It better be the thing that's most important to you too.
It's a weird trapping of content creation that I've definitely noticed as well. One of those like weird things where, you are a content creator, and part of content creation is having enough variety that if something doesn't work out, or you get bored of, you've got enough variety to not get bored, but then also still be so incredibly consistent with what you say and do, that it almost becomes comedic in a sense, where you are trying not to go too narrow, but you also got to try to be narrow enough that you've got to keep people engaged. And I've watched so many comedians or other people who have gotten relative fame through their social media or something really struggle with trying to keep a variety that keeps them engaged and interested for a really long stretch of time. Like, for me, this podcast is just enough variety for me to keep investing in it. And, it's hence why it's been running for, just over 2 years, well, 2.5 years now. But, like, you aren't, like, going to be able to do that in perpetuity unless you have that variety. And some people who do, I don't know, their fame kind of explodes. They forget that they do need that variety for the long term.
No, I think that's true, and I think that's one thing that your format probably lends itself to. You get to talk to people about varying things, and that's sort of what your niche is. You know what I mean? But you get to do it in that. It's interview style podcasting, right? Like it's so it doesn't tie you to a specific genre, I guess you could say, or like a specific topic. So you get to. I think it's smart that you get to kind of bring on anyone that you think is interesting. And I'm going to pretend that that's why you asked me to come on. That's just for me.
Zach, you're interesting.
But I think it would lend itself to giving you the freedom, I think, with your audience to talk about different, have different types of discussions each time, as long as you're staying within that vein of like what you feel is interesting for the adulting angle, the younger adults trying to figure out the world kind of thing. And I think that is a super effective way of giving yourself that variety. But I also think that it sounds, to me personally, absolutely exhausting. I can't imagine having to try to find interesting people to talk to every week about interesting topics that you like, that you feel like your audience is going to like. Like, that process sounds absolutely exhausting to me, and I commend you.
I've had my rough patches. Don't get me wrong. Like, there have been points. I think this is the greatest part about being a part of a network as well, is that I've had points where like things have fallen apart, and have got like I have like an impending point where I don't actually have any more guests, and I am creatively not in the mood. And I think this is the other thing, the consistency of a podcast as opposed to general social media, or even just like your general interests day to day, means that like you've got to be interested in what you're doing the whole time, which sucks. Sometimes there are, for the next, and this is the other thing, we're recording this now. This will be, once this is recorded, the 4th podcast that has been pre-recorded for the next month, and I'm trying to keep a month ahead, but to keep, that allows me to be able to go, the next 2 weekends I'm not at home, and I can kind of edit on the road, but that means I've had to be super prepared and been reaching out to people, and people be getting back to me, and the luck of the draw. And I always get to the end of a season and I'm like, oh, fucking hell, like this is, I don't want to like reach out to too many more people, because just in case they respond, and then I'm like, well, I don't really want to extend my season beyond my cutoff point, because there's a reason why I stop every year, around the 2nd to 3rd week of December, but then at the same time, I'm like, I'm getting on a roll. And it's the other thing, I kind of get into a good rhythm, and then I'm like, why should I stop? Should I just keep creating this in perpetuity? But I know for like, I don't know, it is and I'm sure you do the same as well with all, your podcast and everything as well.
I am probably absolutely maddening to the guests of my podcast. I acknowledge that, and I frequently tell them and remind them that I'm the worst, because I am a scheduling nightmare. Because I not only do I have life, going on, but I'm also a dad. I've got a toddler running around, and we have chaos, just utter chaos at all times in our lives. So I have a very like unscheduled recording schedule. And by that, I mean, I just run down here to the basement whenever I get like a free moment and I bust something out that I can bust out because I'm ready to go. And so I have people that I've been talking to about coming on the podcast for, I mean, literally like a year in some cases that haven't been on yet. But like we've been talking about it, and like one, I feel terrible because I actually had to cancel last time they were supposed to come on, but they still agreed to come back. But it's like I'm booking like so far out most of the time that we can't even put a date on it because like it's so far away and nobody knows what their life is 4 months from now. I almost just like get people, I almost have them just like in a queue of like, are you interested? Yes. All right. What are you interested in? Like if it's the Harry Potter binge, what chapter of like the book that I'm in do you like best that you want to talk about? Okay. When it comes time to get to that chapter, we will figure out a time to record. And I've got several people on that list. But yeah, I'm so bad. And that's why my podcast also has gone through iterations of being a little bit guest heavy for a minute, then solo heavy for a minute, and then guest heavy for a minute, because it's kind of like flown with the patterns of my life and ability to actually get a scheduled time to sit down and record with somebody. Because that's another thing. I don't like, if I commit to a day and time, like I'm going to make sure that I do that. Like I'm going to follow through for that person unless for whatever reason I just absolutely cannot. And I think that's only happened one time, thankfully. But I just don't commit to the time. It's also why I don't have a co-host, right? Like I understand how difficult it would be to deal with me from a scheduling perspective, and like I don't expect somebody else to be inconvenienced in that way. Like no way.
And having those varied interests doesn't help either. Let's be very, very honest. No,
it doesn't. It doesn't. Because
like even for me, I would hate to have like a set time to record every week because it's not possible for me. I've got so much other things going on that like, you know, I look at Christina and she records basically every week on basically the same day, plus or minus. The only time she ever really makes changes is for us Australians when we're on between Radio Mike and myself, and it's always just it's fascinating. Like I don't know how you can be so consistent, and then at the same time, you know, I'm sitting here recording at 6 o'clock in the morning before I go to work, but then also, you know, record, you know, at any point in the morning, but also could negotiate the evening if it worked better for someone. Yeah. It's, you know, it's just all sorts of crazy. And it's, you know, I look back over the times that I've recorded over the last few months, and it's massive.
It is. It makes it hard. It also makes it hard to have those other interests as well. And that's where the varying interest comes back into play, where it's like you have to pick your favorite hobby, I guess you could say, or like favorite thing if you're going to give any time to any of them. And that's happened on my podcast before, where I've had to either really like record myself ahead so that I could take a break from the podcast to like fulfill any other interest that I had at that time. Or I don't feel like I got, like today's a very, very odd day for me because I actually got to ride my motorcycle and record a podcast episode. Those two things don't happen in the same day for me, and I feel like I'm probably going to pay for it after this because of something I'm neglecting that I should be doing around the house, or whatever it is. But yeah, that kind of stuff. And I also like I had to do that one time with a little. I was giving my NBA nerddom a try from a content perspective because I had reached a point of a little bit of burnout on the podcast, to be honest. And I'd gotten myself ahead so that I had episodes that were like canned and scheduled and ready to go. And I would come down here and I tried my hand at doing some little like sketch comedy videos for NBA fans, just for like social media and YouTube, mostly like short form stuff, like making fun of trades and trade requests and parodying. Is that the right way to say that? I truly don't know.
Yeah.
Like talking head sports debate shows or whatever, where I like would put a different shirt on and play another over the top silly character arguing virtually with myself. But it was a fun little project that I may give another shot when the NBA season rolls back around. But it was like, okay, but if you're going to do this, the podcast isn't happening. Like the podcast is on ice. The Harley is collecting dust. Like there's, and that's where, like I said, for content creation, you can't take everything that you're interested in and put it all in one place, because most people aren't going to share your diverse set of interests. And so if you're starting to, especially if you're small like me, right? Like, us small creators trying to find an audience to grow and nurture and turn into a supportive community around the content that you're creating and the stuff that you're trying to entertain them with, is like I totally understand the art of niching down. Like, there's a reason that they tell you to do it. I work in the digital marketing, and I would tell a client the same thing, even in a business sense, right? Like you can grow to expand the audience that you have, but a startup doesn't just come out of the gate as Walmart, so with stuff for everybody, right? Like they have their niche target audience that they really cater something to, and then once they reach a point where they can grow and expand their capabilities, that's typically what businesses do too. Like we're not that dissimilar, even though all we're trying to do is bring joy to somebody's day. I'm not selling some kind of how-to book or consultancy through my podcast or anything like that. But so I totally understand the niching down, and that's why I've never just taken all of the stuff that I've been making for 15 years and thrown them on the same page. Like I've had so many different social media accounts, so many different pages, so many different names of stupid little things that I'm doing because I know not to cross those audiences, because as soon as I post an episode about the upcoming Harry Potter TV show, why it's gonna probably fail, but here's some fun things they could do if it doesn't, and here's a fun little sketch comedy video that only a small percentage of NBA fans are even gonna understand because they're not as nerdy as me about it. And here's this Sons of Anarchy video that I'm going to talk about because I love that show and I talk about it on the podcast. And hey, remember The Office? It's impossible to cultivate a consistent audience that way. I'm pretty sure.
It's giving ADHD vibes, to be honest.
It really is. It really is.
But at the same time, I think it does speak to the way we consume media as well. It doesn't, just because you like a lot of things doesn't mean you can't enjoy them. You can't enjoy them all equally. And I think that that's a really important aspect of part of our pop culture and our cultural zeitgeist is, there is so much on offer that we shouldn't shut down the possibility of being a fan of more than one thing. Canonically, a lot of people I'm friends with are big fans of Park and Rec, but also Bob's Burgers, but also, really do enjoy a good Disney movie and, and bits and pieces, and even beyond that, and I've I always felt very sympathetic to your podcast, because it felt like something I would do, because I didn't get to watch a lot of TV as a child. I didn't, Glee was not something I watched until I was, out of high school.
Still never seen it.
And good. I think you would have some hot takes on it. But like, I've only started really getting into pop culture. Well, and especially 2000s and 2010s pop culture now. And I'm like, I feel like I'm 10 years behind because, what everyone's watching now, I'm like, I just can't. I'm still stuck in that like 2010s kind of craziness that was TV, especially back then. And I've got to move myself through that before I can get to, what's big nowadays.
No, I'm with you. I have not seen anything that is currently considered popular and good. Just like I hadn't seen the stuff that I'm covering now back when it was popular and good. And that was always the concept of the podcast that I gravitated towards, because I did feel like it gave me some leeway to explore different series that I do enjoy, and even tackle some that I've never seen. I absolutely want to cover a series like in real time for the first time on the podcast, not just stuff that I was late to but like have seen now and I love it. Like I really do want to get into at least one series here, hopefully very soon, in which I'm consuming it for the first time right then and there and giving like my actual reactions, because then I get to do the like stupid predictions. I'm an idiot. Let's make fun of me the whole time that I'm trying to watch this and learn how it's going to unfold and predict the things that are going to come out and say who I like before I know why they're terrible people or whatever it is about that show. That really, I really look forward to. I'm considering possibly books too, but more than likely it would be a TV show first. I feel like the barrier of entry might be a little bit lower for me to watch a show and talk about it, as opposed to committing to like a book series. That's a pretty daunting task. Yeah. So, but it is the concept. I did think that it was going to give me some leeway to vary up what media I'm jumping into, but I am finding again that it's even tougher to navigate within the series plurals that I choose, because I've chosen to this point very, very different ones. And find what has been very interesting about it for me, and honestly fulfilling though, is one, I can see in the download numbers and the behavior of the like where I'm getting play. The audience is still small enough that it is very clear in the data. Because small differences are glaring in the numbers. I can tell that I am reaching different people in the different series that I'm talking about with those episodes, based on just the numbers and also like where they're listening. For instance, Harry Potter, the vast majority of my audience is listening on Spotify. Sons of Anarchy, the vast majority of my audience is listening on Apple Podcasts. With The Office, and I've done fewer of those episodes, but I have gotten through season 1 and kind of wrapped that up. But that has as much listenership on YouTube as it does on podcasting platforms for me. And so it's like I can clearly see that these are different people, but within that, the small, like, I guess you could say the community part of the podcast that's kind of slowly building a little bit is I know that I have people that are either listening to all of the series that I'm covering. Apparently they're just glutton for punishment and hearing my voice a lot. Or with very small cases, they're trying something new along the way because they got into me because of the Harry Potter binge, and they've never watched Sons of Anarchy, and they're watching it now so that they can keep listening along with the podcast. And for me, that part's really fulfilling and cool to see. But I also know that there is a portion of my audience that feels alienated in that they either came around because of one thing and they're not interested in hearing me talk about another series that I'm interested in, or they don't like that they have to almost sift through the feed to find it. I label stuff very clearly. It literally says Harry Potter, title of episode, Sons of Anarchy, title of episode, The Office, title of episode, through the feed, you'll find that all the way down to at least until you get down to the point where there are more than one. Some of the old Harry Potter episodes just have Harry Potter somewhere in the title, but I've tried to keep it very clear and easy for people on the feed. But it's been an interesting thought exercise, and I would be lying if I said that it hasn't influenced the future series that I try to incorporate into the podcast, and whether I even continue in the way that I'm going. I've considered a few different updates just based off of what I'm seeing my audience do and react to, and potentially adjusting what my original plan was for the podcast to maybe to try to cater more to that core as much as I can, while still trying to build and keep everything fresh and also interesting for me, because I got to make this stuff, and most of the time it's me sitting down here talking to myself. So I better be interested in it. Otherwise, how will anybody else be? I'm sure.
100%. And it is such a hard thing to be on top of as well. It's
for sure,
part of you wants to react to the numbers, the other part of you, for consistency's sake, wants to keep on going with what you're doing for a little while longer. And at what point do you just keep going? It's kind of it's a hard balance to get.
And I feel like for those that are like us, doing this solo, you're a part of a network, but this is your podcast. Right, you have a constant resource and support, but the work is yours, right? You're the host, you're the editor, you're the social media manager, you are the strategist, you are the journalist, you are literally the business of this podcast that you have. Same as yours truly over here. We're doing solo endeavors in this space, and it can make it, I think that puts us in a weird spot if we to potentially overreact to things in the audience and into feedback that we get, because we don't have a co-host or something to say it to and have a laugh about it or whatever, or hey, fuck that person or whatever, you know what I mean? If you get a troll, which I certainly have. I've been roasted on social media a couple of times, to be honest. But it does make it almost hypersensitive to it. I don't know if you are, but I am. I see a negative comment on a TikTok video or an Instagram reel or something to whatever I'm doing, and I'm considering changing my entire podcast strategy and my entire social media strategy because one person said something negative on that post. It must be terrible. Why would I be doing this? This is so crazy. And there's no one. Cooler heads come in the form of me sleeping on it, as opposed to bouncing it off of a co-host or or a network. Probably, I'm sure that you've had those moments where you've reached out to them to just be like, talk me off the ledge kind of conversations.
100%.
Yeah.
I think also the other great part about like having other people around is that, you know, there's someone to relate with your very specific struggle as well. I find even editing, like I use a different software to the rest of the network to edit at this point in time. I know we use a variety of software that, you know, Christina is, I believe, on Audition at this point in time and bits and pieces. And I have my gripes with Reaper. It's a great software. It's what I use to edit this podcast. It's a great little piece of kit that you can kind of use for free in perpetuity. Reaper, I hope you're not listening to this. Please let me keep using your lovely app. Because theoretically you need a license for it, but if you tell them that you're still evaluating, it'll let you keep going. And it's always like sometimes, even then, or some very Australian thing will happen, and I go to sit there and explain exactly what's going on while, you know, or I'll have like a panic at like 2:00 in the afternoon, which is the equivalent of midnight Eastern time in the States. And I'm like, well, I've got to have this panic by myself now because there's no one else here to like, you know, react immediately. And I don't necessarily want to weigh people down by them waking up to me panicking. So I just try to like keep my head down sometimes. It's, you know, it's very lonely being your own host as well.
It can be because you also like, you get that moment, at least I do, and I think anybody that's actually effectively doing it, right? Like, this isn't a woe is me type of a comment, but you do, as you're talking into the void by yourself in the middle of the night in your basement, waiting on the ghosts to get you, you are also wondering, like, is this good? Does anybody give a shit what I'm saying right now? Like, why? I have actually, there was one time I was in it, right? Like I was in that kind of like, I was kind of in that mental state with where I was with the podcast and stuff. And I sat down and I was recording an episode and it wasn't good. Like my delivery was off. I wasn't like, my cadence was off. And in the back of my head, as I'm trying to push through it and record an episode, I'm going, who the fuck cares? Like, why do you think that anybody gives a shit what you have to say on this topic? I had to just shut it down. Like, I hit stop, I closed my laptop, and I went back upstairs, and I was like, we're just going to do this another day. Because there was no, if you get into that space with a co-host, you can be like, I'm struggling with it today. They can carry you. Or they can pick you up, they can lift your spirits up and be like, hey, remember why we started this? Like, remember why we're doing this in the first place? If nothing else, like, so many podcasts, I think, that are success. I recently, and again, it's the point where we're recording this, you're probably going to have several episodes come out between recording this and when it actually posts. But the latest one that you released with the Well, I Laughed people. Yeah. Right? Like, their whole premise was like, we're just having a conversation. We're best friends. Like, this brings us joy. This makes us happy. And we just happen to be kind of like recording it and sharing it. Yeah. And I think a lot of successful podcasts that are co-hosted, you know, are a lot like that. And I think that's probably a very good support system when you get into those doldrums. And us flying solo, when we get into those doldrums, we kind of just gotta like get out of it.
Yes, yeah, we've got to snap ourselves out. There's no one else. I don't know, and it's fascinating because of all things, we're recording on a release day, which means in a couple of hours' time I've got to put a podcast out that's only half edited. Lucky me. But
shut up, Zach. I need to get to editing. We need to end this conversation right now. I got shit to do.
We're gonna sit in silence for the next 10 minutes. But I've almost been jealous because the other podcast that's coming out is the episode with Sorta Kind of Funny. And I put these two back to back on purpose just because they're very similar in vibes and they kind of bounce off each other. And the three podcasts, Content and Capable, Sorta Kind of Funny, and Well I Laughed, have all we've all been guested. They've both guested on mine. Well I Laugh guested on Sorta Kind of Funny. And unfortunately, Grant and Maya, who run Well I Laugh, are in Europe at the moment. But like, we've had conversations about, about guesting and bits and pieces. And those two groups, they're both, one's a brother and sister, and one are two good friends, have been excellent guests, a really lovely guests to have. And I was I was jealous, let's be honest. Yeah. That like, you can do a podcast like that, where you sit at the kitchen table or for Sort of Kind of Funny, sit on a Zoom call and just riff off what's going on, what story you have in front of you, which I love, but I never created. Like, the podcast I'm with is Content and Capable, and I've got to understand that this is, in the end, what I really love doing. Mm-hmm. The problem being is that I look at, a partnership like that and I go, sometimes I wish I didn't have such varied interests and I could just focus on one thing, like those podcasts, and just like keep running it in that direction, which isn't necessarily isn't necessarily true. And it's it is a hard reality and a hard thing to kind of face your own jealousy and go, I've got to keep moving forward, and I've got to understand that, I'm mildly jealous, but what I'm doing right now works.
Yeah, and that has honestly been the most rewarding thing about podcasting from this side, I think, of the microphone, is the different relationships that I have gained from doing it with other podcasters, because I love going on other podcasts. I love doing this kind of, these kind of conversations that are off of my feed, I guess you could say. Even though sometimes I do post them on my feed anyways. You can hear our first conversation on my feed. But the relationships that I have built with other podcasters that I talk to regularly outside of podcast land, granted, we generally talk about things related to podcasting or related to the network that we're in, but it still is a very, like, that's been really fulfilling for me, just as a human, to just like talk to those other humans and kind of like make those, I guess you could, I don't want to be, I don't want to be the weirdo that says like, I made new friends, cause like, but I call them pod friends, right? Like, and that's one thing too that I've struggled with the varying interests, to bring this whole thing back around, is what if I did want to pivot the podcast and like finish a series and be done with that series and move on to the next series? Like, all of those people that I talked to because of that series, and that I like built relationships with because of that series, like, would they have any reason to want to come back and like talk to me about something else for any other reason? Yeah. Because like their niche is that. Whereas
it is such a hard part of like moving on and changing. Like, you've got to be very aware of the fact that, not everyone's going to be interested in absolutely everything you're doing or every conversation you have. And exactly. I don't know, it sucks because you're aiming for success, and at the same time, you're not necessarily going to get it just by the nature of what you're doing. And it's the same with me here. Like, it's not an uncommon thing to have.
Yeah.
But yeah. I see. Yeah. Well, we're getting towards the end of the episode. First of all, Zach, a massive thank you for coming on the podcast. I always love a bit of a retrospective, and I've been looking at the schedule. We've had a lot of chaos, a lot of funny, some more serious commentary in bits and pieces, but a bit of reflectiveness is on the cards for these few weeks. So as we head into October, release dates, editing magic, bits and pieces. But yeah, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me back.
Yeah. Where can people find you on the internet?
Yeah, I'll give you one place to go because it has access to all the other places that you can go, and that is the website belatedbinge.com. It's got links to social and all my latest episodes. It's got links to Patreon and YouTube, and you can hear the episodes right there on the website. You can leave a voicemail. You can do lots and lots of things with this website that I would love for people to do. So go there, and you can find however you might want to engage with me. You can find it through that, belatedbinge.com. I don't know why I felt like I needed to sing it.
No, I love the web, like an all-in-one website. I'm a massive fan of that. Of all things, I've been recently making sure I plug my own website, samobjournalist.com, just because it's like, if anyone wants to see what I do, like, outside of the confines of this podcast, outside of my crazy shenanigans, that's where you need to head, because that's what I get up to on a day-to-day basis. Lots of writing and lots of researching and talking to people, which is part this podcast, but part I then have to sit and transcribe it all, which is my least favorite part of my job. Has there been anything that you've been reading or listening to that you wanted to plug?
That is a really good question. I guess I will, because I know that we're focusing kind of on like books and things like that. We're kind of staying out of
books and music and bits
work
and pieces
and stuff. Yeah, so this is interesting to me. I don't know how many of your listeners are going to find this interesting, but I have been covering the TV show Sons of Anarchy on my podcast, which is like 10 years old, right? So I feel like it's still, I feel like it's old enough that it's still like talk aboutable without disrespecting.
Yeah.
But one of the things that comes up in those conversations is how accurate was this depiction of this culture, right? Of that, like that 1% biker lifestyle. So I found myself interested in and intrigued in going back in kind of like the history of like 1% outlaw biker culture and trying to see where the similarities are, because there was a lot of influence from that world that was sanctioned through the show. I won't mention specific club names on this podcast or anything, just in case there's any sensitivities for anyone. But there were real life outlaw bikers that were a part of that show that helped to be that cultural, almost like culture police for them, to make sure that they didn't veer so like outlandishly outside of what real life would be. But I do find it interesting to kind of go back to the stuff that we have had. There's been lots of like club presidents and stuff like that have like written books or done documentary style stuff, or there's also been law enforcement, like ATF agents that have infiltrated clubs and written books about it and stuff like that. And I found myself interested in that, again, kind of like adjacent to the podcast, of like, you know, how much of this is rooted in stuff that's actually happened and how much of this is, you know, Hollywood making things go boom. And it's surprising how much, while it is sensationalized for the show, a lot of it, you could say that a lot of the episodes and a lot of the events take that take place on that show in a sensationalized manner are depicted from stuff that has really happened in this world in our lives right down the street from us, like by people who actually are partaking, and so that's been really interesting to me. There's been some pretty decently popular ones of those that have come out, and I'm trying to pull up real quick any that I can spout off here real quick. Under and Alone is one that I've not read myself yet, but I imagine it's probably fairly interesting. The one that I read most recently was Vacos, Mongols, and Outlaws, and it was about an informant that infiltrated those 3 clubs, and they actually did. That book was so well received that they did do like a Gangland series for TV about that book. And so I would suggest the book if you have any interest at all in just like subculture stuff and like the undercover type work. There's some really fascinating stuff out there.
Bikie gangs are a massive thing here in Australia.
Are they?
I vividly remember they outlawed them in like 2011. Because they get kind of like it's great in theory, but like they often get involved in like drug trafficking and they end up being organized crime units basically, and so they basically signed these really, and they were only very short lived, but these really prohibitive laws around like what kind of groups you could drive around in a motorbike with and bits and pieces. Were like trying to crack down on like crimes associated with motorbike groups, and it was fascinating. My dad, while not being a politics man himself, was around those upper echelons of politics, including the governor of the state in which we were living in, and he got to hear some very interesting opinions from some very legally minded people that were ready to, who had very strong opinions on what was going on. So, fascinating stuff.
It's an absolutely fascinating subculture, and the like there are absolutely layers. And as somebody who rides a motorcycle, I'm not affiliated with any organizations at all. But you can literally run the gamut of just the weekenders who like to throw on matching t-shirts and go for a ride, some with more organized roles and maybe have some insignias that if they're smart they got permission to put on, and all the way up to what is the 1%er, aka the 1% of society that's living outside of the law. But there's a lot of 99ers out there too, so it's a really fascinating subculture, and just kind of being again a small part of it in that I enjoy the camaraderie and I enjoy the activity of riding a motorcycle. But again, not affiliated with any of them. I do have a little bit of like a vested like interest in the subculture. So I guess for me, it does, and it kind of goes hand in hand with the podcast too. So it's kind of fun.
And driving motorbikes is obviously like it's a massive part about a massive part of just our culture in general, which I think is very fascinating. Awesome. Well, you can find me at sam.the.journalist on Instagram and on TikTok. You can find me at samobjournalist.com if you want to have a look at some of my work. Always would love feedback if anyone ever gets around to reading it. You can see most of my radio stuff for free, but the work I do for print is behind a paywall. So there is some stuff that's not behind a paywall, but like the vast majority of work I do is behind a paywall, and it's but you can always read the summaries, and I'm sure if you ask the right questions to the right someone, that person might be happy to give you a bit of a peek into exactly what I've been writing.
Speaking of Outlaws.
I find paywalls this funny part. Like, it's the way that we make money. Like, that's the way a newspaper makes money. And I totally understand. Like, that is the business model. And I understand that, like, without people paying for the newspapers or paying for subscriptions, I don't get paid. Like, this newspaper doesn't exist without it. But on the other hand, I'm like, this makes it incredibly hard when you're putting in awards applications or jobs. You just don't get to be able to, like, really showcase your work and, like, look what I've done. It's like, yes, look what I've done, but you've got to pay for it, you know. And it's only like $1. I think you can do a digital subscription for like $1 a week, at least through my company, which is great. But it's like, at the same time, it's another subscription that someone's paying for that, you know, we already pay for so many subscriptions. Anyway, such is life. But I'm going to plug the book Jasper Jones. It's an Australian... I think I've plugged it before. It's an Australian book about these kids in Vietnam War era Australia, which was probably, you know, World War One and World War Two were massive conflicts, but the Vietnam War shaped us more culturally, and multiculturally as well than we give it credit for sometimes. And it's all about this Indigenous kid who is accused of killing a girl, and that is just the start of the book. There is so many more layers. There is commentary on racism back in the 60s. There's commentary on, you know, being a nerd in an otherwise sporting country town, in a sporting nation, and love and abuse and all kinds of what you would expect from a 60s, like a novel set in the 60s, written with today's lens. So, you know, so fascinating, a really good read, quite thrilling. It does take like 150 pages to kind of really get into a good rhythm, but I found, like, even the first page gets me every time.
Nice.
Awesome. Well, Zach, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It's been so lovely to chat with you again.
No, thank you.
Content and Capable was recorded, edited, and produced by Samuel O'Brien. You can follow the podcast at Content, the letter N, Capable on Instagram, and you can find it on Facebook. You can also send an email through to contentandcapablepod@gmail.com with any of your thoughts, queries, or concerns. The best way to support the podcast is to leave a review on your preferred podcatcher so more people can hear the podcast. The art was done by Opia, and the music was written, edited, and produced by Jason Hilton. Content and Capable is proud to be a part of the Deus Ex Media Network, where you can find a podcast for any of your nerdy interests.
Hey folks, Alex and I have been traveling, so there's no new episode today, but don't worry. There'll be one on Friday, I promise. I will make that happen for you. Our schedule's been pretty crazy, and we haven't really had time to sit down to record The Great Divide, but I prepared this little trailer for you guys, and I hope you all like it, so enjoy! Coffee, tea, honor, cabbage. Long ago, the four elements lived in harmony. Then, shit went totally cray when the Avatar attacked. Only the Cabbage Man, merchant of fine cruciferous vegetables, could stand against his trolling. But when the world needed some dank veg, he vanished. 10 years have passed, and my partner and I have started a new podcast.
My cabbages! An Avatar podcast.
A weekly show about Avatar The Last Airbender. Whether it's Sokka's new line of cologne...
Hey, look at you, sitting there on a seal. Well, now look back at me. I'm on an even bigger seal. Now look away.
D&D related antics.
You have to make an acrobatics check for that, and Aang just, like, unzips his pants and whips out his D20s. He's just like, I got this.
Or randomly breaking into song.
Some
Go bending waterfall.
We'll stumble our way through the greatest show ever made, one episode at a time.
You can reach us at CabbageCast, which is our Twitter, or
subscribe wherever you catch pod.
Rotten cabbages? What kind of slum do you think this is?
Thank you for listening to Content and Capable. Don't forget to rate and review, and we'll see you next week for another episode.
Deus Ex Media.